Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Big Think Live. I'm Jason Olson, one of the editors at Big Think. Today, we have another dynamic duo for you this week, a very flavorful presence of the award-winning chef and author, Gabriele Corcos, and iconic film star, Debi Mazar, also a masterful chef in her own right. Today's topic is life, love, and Italian cooking. You may have seen Gabriele and Debi on their series Extra Virgin on the cooking channel. And they're also doing their own live streaming lessons on Instagram. I highly recommend these. Gabriele is a Ducati rider and a musician. He was the creator and producer of Extra Virgin, a New York Times bestselling author along with Debi, and a James Beard Award recipient.
Woohoo! Sounds good.
After studying medicine and enlisting in the Italian army, Gabriele took a chance, making financial and a motorcycle sacrifice to study music in Brazil. His love for the drums later led him to travel extensively through Cuba, Europe, many places. He just gave me the list. And in 2001, while in Florence, he met Debi. This relationship led him to Los Angeles. It was while living in the US, in Los Angeles, where his sort of cooking skills kind of animated or came to the surface. He was sort of a stay-at-home dad while Debi would be, doing series and filming. And that's what made him the Tuscan Gun we have today. Debi Mazar, American actor, television personality known for playing assertive, stylish, and sharp-tongued women. She began her career as a hip-hop B-girl in New York City. Her first television appearance was on the pilot for a hip-hop television dance show, Graffiti Rock, in 1984. And Debi later went on to perform in several of Madonna's music videos. She's played in a number of supporting roles in films like Goodfellas, The Doors, Little Man Tate, Singles, Bullets Over Broadway, and of course, Batman and Forever. She has starred in several TV series, including Civil War's LA Law, Friends, Entourage, Younger, and Power. And in 2018, she played Ava Gardner in a Spanish series called Arte Madrid, which is now available in the States through MHZ Choice streaming service. If you're new to Big Think Live, today's webinar will last for about 30-40 minutes, and we'll start with our discussion with Debi and Gabriele first, followed by the Q&A, but anyone watching can put in questions at any time, and we will get them here. Thank you. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having us. Thanks for having us. How are you?
All right. Let's talk about how sort of food and cooking both came into your lives individually, because I think those stories are so sort of interesting and distinct for both of you.
Okay, so for me, I had a mother who had me at 15. We lived with my grandmother in Queens at New York, and my mother couldn't cook. So I would go to the Avenue, Jamaica Avenue, with my grandmother with the shopping cart. We would go to the butcher, the baker, and come home with stuff. And I would sit on a little stool next to the sink and watch my grandma cook. My house always smelled great. When we moved out of my grandma's house, my mother still didn't know how to cook. So I had learned a few things from my grandma, but basically, I ended up eating Swanson's TV dinners. Things that a teen mom would cook for her kids. Right. Given that we still lived in New York City and she had a colorful array of friends. So, in my building, which is kind of a small project building in Queens, I was surrounded by Chinese, Italian, Puerto Rican, Cuban, African American, I had an array of smells through my building, and different friends. I would go to their homes. They would tell a story, or the grandmother or the mother or whatever, and I was just really attracted to the different smells and appreciating the different cultures and cuisines in my building. When I finally moved out on my own, I just really like to entertain. I'm a Leo. My birthday's in August, and I've always liked to have people come to dinner and socialize over a meal. So, and I started traveling as soon as I could over to Italy, Spain, wherever. And I have a love for cooking. With that said, he's a better cook. He's a chef. I am not. I'm just a person who likes to cook. I follow recipes out of cookbooks. I, buy gadgets like things like the Instapot. I like to have fun with food, and I like to eat, cuisines from different countries. So he's got like the Tuscan Italian thing covered, and also Mexican, which he learned how to do really well when he lived in Los Angeles. But my love affair with food really kind of came to a head when I met him, because he taught me the simplicity of simple ingredients, preparing things fresh with much more simplicity than 3,000 ingredients. And we just started cooking together.
I became a chef just because of her. I never considered myself a chef. I grew up in Florence in a farm, and food and ingredients were just like part of life. Right. So I never grew up thinking that this one day could be my career. That's just what you do to love your family, to take care of the people around you, to celebrate, to have parties. And I cooked because everybody cooked. My grandmother cooked, my father, my mother, my mother taught me how to cook on the fire. My grandmother taught me how to bake. My mother taught me how to feed my brother who was younger than me. And, fun enough, I've never been a great student. I'm always, drawn. It's curiosity that kind of like propels my knowledge. So in school, I really never done that well. And my father used to mock me. It's like, you need to stop studying and go to cook. Go cook someplace. Because I always loved it. I always cooked for my family. But I felt that because he was a big professor and a surgeon, he was kind of like making fun of the blue-collar adventure that could have been if I decided to become a cook. So I wanted to prove him wrong. And that is actually why I enrolled into medical school. Then eventually life led me to meet her. And once I arrived in LA, I had a wife to feed and a first child to feed and my own house with my family. And that really turned into just our existence, being together, cooking and loving the family environment. It was actually her that pushed me to kind of like step it up a little bit and put me in front of a camera one day, a little camera that was given to us for our wedding. And it all started from there. But I owe it to this muse, the fact that when I'm by myself, if I am by myself, I don't cook. I don't cook for myself.
He's lying. Yes, you do.
I have leftovers. What I make by myself. Grilled cheese sandwiches.
He makes good stuff.
Yes, but I make the stuff for you first, and then.
How did that? But what was it like? When the relationship developed and you were sort of cooking for each other, because that's not always like an easy. I mean, I'm like Debbie. I'm not a professional chef, but I like to cook and I do recipes and stuff. But sometimes sharing the kitchen with someone, you can get territorial, or you can.
Oh,
How did that happen?
Nothing really happened. I mean, the truth of the matter is, like, the kitchen's like the one place in my home, in my family's home, in the way that I grew up, where it's always been sort of the heart of the home. Because I've always been a flea market shopper and like kind of like a gadget person and love to buy different cooking, whether it's vintage or modern utensils. It would be like me going, oh my God, I have this like weird hamburger presser, or I have this thing that was my grandmother's, or let's, instead of using Tupperware, I have these wonderful little glass boxes from the 50s and we can store the food in there, just whatever. And turn them onto new ingredients, because I was in my country as opposed to his country, and the same in his country. So, we would just have fun. We'd put some music on, always music in the kitchen. We always cracked open like, a nice glass of wine together, got a little buzzed. Happy.
I have to say, Deborah, aside from a couple of my really good friends from high school, which are like brothers to me, is really the only person that I'm able to share my kitchen counter without getting pissed.
Right. Oh, okay.
When people come over and they offer to help, I'm like, no, your guest, don't touch anything. Just here's a drink. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. It is also a good excuse, especially when you're in a happy relationship. I think kind of like to be close to each other and mingle and rub on each other and just be happy. So that's kind of like really the spirit that we have in the kitchen. And obviously we do have regular days like everybody else where, it's work and school and homework and but our kitchen is always live.
Yeah, like our kitchen, there's always like a dog between our feet. Our dog weighs 120 pounds. He's there to
every scrap
get the scraps. So I'm always stepping over the dog. I'm having to move around the dishwasher that's constantly open and being loaded.
He's actually here because the rain is coming and he's trying to come and hide under my desk.
Oh, he doesn't like the vacuum, I take it.
Yeah, he doesn't like the thunders and the lightning. Plus, it's been going crazy in New York because too many fireworks.
Yeah,
so my poor animal has been really kind of like,
But in the kitchen, we've always kept when the kids were growing up, we always had big box of crayons, papers for doodling, just so that it became sort of like a family experience. So the kids were engaged. He would give one of the kids all right, here's a butcher knife. Cut this onion or this carrot, and I want you to cut it nice and thin. And I remember coming home from location once. I was shooting something. I came home after 2 weeks, and he had my 3-year-old standing on a kitchen chair with a 8-inch butcher knife, chef's knife, in her hand. Cut. I'm like, oh my god, what if she falls? She's gonna get impaled. What are you doing? And he's like, if she can use a device, she can learn how to use a knife properly. And I was just having visions of her taking her finger off.
It hasn't happened yet, though.
No,
she's a
really good cook. The youngest one, she bakes, she cooks, she makes dishes. She makes dishes of all different cuisines.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that for her, it's not an act of love. It's more a reaction to the fact that I cook mainly only Italian, and she's a New York gal. So she wants to eat Thai. She wants to eat Chinese. She wants to make different things that usually wouldn't pop in my mind.
Like her and her friends, they go for walks in the hood, and they go out for a cheap under $10 Thai meal, and she just really likes different flavors. Be quiet. And I don't want her to hear because she's upstairs, and in Italy she won't be doing that. But it's just great that they're both kids have an interest in other flavors, and so the kitchen's just very active.
Right.
It
seems sort of both of you have kind of had these different, eras and existences together, both as, just a couple. And then you had, 2 daughters in LA, and you were working on a series, and Gabriele was sort of this, stay-at-home dad and musician. And then that turned into, extra virgin now. And then I find it very interesting and then you decided to, do New York and make this whole other era for yourselves and your family. And now you're going to Italy in about 2 weeks and making a whole other home and era. And I'm a little bit jealous for some of our.
It's been 20 years. Debbie and I, since we met, we always, first kidding, obviously fantasizing about one day being in Tuscany, and then we started working on the family. So as much as it was wonderful and glorious every time that we went back to Italy for Christmas, for summertime, we always came back home to the United States. Home has been Los Angeles, home has been New York, and now the kids are grown up. One is going to college, one is going to high school, and
I didn't want to raise my daughters in LA. I mean, LA for me was a great place because I got there at a certain time that it was still kind of had a remnants of another time past. You have the homes, you had some of the older stars that were still there to tell the stories. There was still a studio system in place. There was no internet at a certain point, so there wasn't all this online content of people creating stuff. There were no reality shows at the time. There was journalism. So I felt like I got the best years while I was there, and we started this family. But at a certain point, I'm like, you know what? I would like to raise my daughters in New York. So I want them to have eyes in the back of their head. I want them to be like citizens of the world. And I feel like New York is a place to give them that. And so I got them through. I got one out of high school and I got one going into high school. But now, you know, we're kind of like, I have to say for myself, I feel a little bit like a gypsy. Like I really like sort of reinventing myself every decade. And also just going on new journeys, you know, like why I don't want to get to Italy and be like retired. Right. You know what I mean? I want to get there and be like, oh, wow, like let me go to this place and do this and maybe start creating some different type of art or you know, or inventing something. Like I just think that, you know, there's endless possibilities. And so I'm really excited. I mean, obviously, we planned all this before there was a global pandemic. We had a lot of things in place. We were ahead of like the curve of like, you know, preparations. And now like they're shutting like the borders down. So I'm kind of getting nervous because we don't know if the kids are online schooling, you know, distance learning. We don't know what's going to happen at the airports. I have had COVID already, and so has my youngest daughter. So I feel slightly protected, but we don't know enough about this virus to know how long those antibodies will last. And if I can get reinfected again, I've got to do a lot of flying coming up. So, you know, it's kind of a very scary time here in the United States with this virus. But I'm just trying to have faith and love and the fact that we are searching for, you know, greener pastures, no pun intended.
It's going to be our Green Acres moment.
Yeah, Debbie, I wanted to ask you about when you had COVID, what was the most sort of revealing or surprising to you about that experience? I mean, I'm sure all of it was unexpected, but was there anything that was really sort of, you know, eye-opening for you?
I think just how vulnerable and small we are as a human race. I mean, I got except I didn't get COVID toes. That's the only thing I didn't get. But I got every other side effect and symptom. And I, you know, between like pink eye, my lungs felt like someone was like, you know, invading them. Like, you know, you could actually feel it happening by like day 5. You know, the incredible pain, shortness of breath, weakness, cough, body.
And whatever I cooked, she couldn't smell it.
I couldn't smell.
So I couldn't take care of her with that. It ended up being like little vegetable broths and simple foods because she's, you know.
I just couldn't taste anything. I was like, ugh. And it just made me feel very small, very vulnerable. It took about, I would say, a good 40 days, 20 of them being really sick and another 20 like shedding the virus. So it just taught me that, you know, now that I've had it, I wouldn't want anybody to get it. I'm stunned at the amount of ignorance of people that don't want to wear a mask or take precautions and social distancing right now. I mean, you can go back to your life eventually down the road, but let's just at least wait for the vaccine to come instead of infecting people. I think in a moment like this, the demonstrations, you know, after George Floyd's death were very important. I think all those young people that turned out to all those protests, it was very important, you know, in history for them to speak their truth and to have their voice because it's their future. Right. And so that was scary for me because as a parent, my daughter was like, I'm going. I mean, literally it was down the street from us is Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn and a lot of different you know, popular places, and they can just get to the city easily. But, you know, the one had antibodies, so I was like, all right, hopefully, you know, she'll be okay. And the other one wasn't as active with that, but it's just scary because we still don't know what the outcome of all that's going to be. And I think that, you know, now I just think that you have to just believe in, like, you know, your family and love and trying to just stay busy at home and creative as much as possible. Yes. It's hard to be cooped up for 5 months. I mean, my hair, brown hair, my hair has gone gray. I've had to embrace it because no, I'm not having my colorist who is more than willing to come over. And I'm like, you know what? No, like, I don't know who you've seen, where you've been. You're not coming in my house, period.
We haven't killed each other yet. Actually, you know, it's been interesting between playing cook and nurse and then getting to the point where we finally kind of like rejoin into planning the departure. We've been working a year now to try to the date and figure it out. So now that she's doing better, we're finally getting into the groove. We're starting to box the stuff. We're doing these Instagram lives because we kind of like feel that we want to say goodbye. We want to try to give to our fans and our, the people who know us as much as possible about this experience before we disconnect and get to Italy and hope that we have a decent Wi-Fi.
I'm not as on the same page with him as that. I just feel like you can live anywhere. You don't have to we're not disconnecting. We're both like on Instagram all the time. Like we engage. Yeah. That's why I'm like, oh my God, you're leaving. You're the ultimate New Yorker in New York. Now oh my God. I'm like, I've always left. I've always come back. It's in my DNA, and and New York's not going anywhere. I got one leaving behind in New York. And I think that
these days you can be anywhere, really.
Yeah.
If anything, this COVID experience has proved that we can be productive and working and part of our community even without being physically on the street all the time.
I don't have like this big swan song ending. Like, oh, here goes another chapter. Like it's just like, all right. New place, new journey. I'll be back. I'll call you when I get into town, and I'll see you. Like I'm not.
Maybe that's your both of you have this sort of grace, and you just sort of flow through life. Maybe it's that you're not defining these eras, and it's just one sort of.
I think that it's important. Aside from the personal motivation and the spirit by which you do that or make decision, I think it's very important to share the fact that in life and certain moments in life, it is nice to grab the bull by the horns and make a choice and try to change your life if that's what you're pulled toward. One of the things that me and her, and the reason why we fell in love right away and we built a family right away, is that we're very similar in the sense that we don't like having regrets. If there is something that you can do for yourself or for others or for your family or for your inner being or a challenge, it helps you grow, it helps you, and it also helps the relationship because we're always pushing ourselves to kind of like do things. I mean, it is yes, I'm going home, but it is a jump. It is a different lifestyle. It's a different house. It's a different language. It's a different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not fluent, but I've never had a problem in being understood. I get whenever I
just look you in the eyes, Debbie, I feel like you convey a lot in your eyes.
Yeah, and my hands. I talk with my hands, but I just also feel like I've studied Italian. I've spent 20 years with an Italian. When I go there, I start picking up, and I'm going to actually go to class because now more than ever, being a New Yorker, I don't have a lot of patience for. I want to get the job done. I want it done quick, and I want to know the answers, and then I want to discuss.
Yeah, Italians are a little too prosaic for her sometimes.
Yeah, they go on.
You ask a question, and they start talking, and the answer doesn't come unless you ask it again. People just like to talk.
Yeah,
I have to ask. I mean, I guess it's more a question for you, Debbie, because you've seen New York in all these different eras. Do you have a particular favorite era? I mean, what do you think when you see sort of developments like, I don't know, like Hudson Yards or something and all the big real estate stuff? Does it get to you? Or are you just sort of like, well, it's just, another version of New York?
I'm a modernist to a degree, so I'm not as nostalgic for the idea that the city is going to be the same as it ever was. I mean, when Giuliani cleaned up Times Square, I was like, oh my God, like what's happening here?
Yeah.
It turned into Disneyland in a way that I really didn't like it. He cleaned up 8th Avenue, but the crime went down and things were changing. I was living in LA then. I would come back home to I had an apartment here that I was keeping, and I was just like, oh Lord, this is really changing. But I have to say that when I was coming up, my visions of hanging out with my mom in the 60s and 70s, watching New York, develop, watching the World Trade Center go up, but still have the village and still have the rawness. I love the 80s, especially because I was then out of the house. I was an adult. And you still had the seediness of 42nd Street and like the strip clubs on 8th Avenue, like the Gaiety or whatever. And you still had like the raunchiness of like the piers where, all the queens hung. I mean, I knew those kids. In fact, when Madonna, at a certain point we became friends, I brought her down to the piers. I said, you've got to see these guys. They're incredible dancers. And I introduced her to some of these people, which, then spurned her kind of, direction and with voguing and all that crap.
Yeah.
But, my favorite eras really were the 80s, I think, and 90s. I mean, the worst part of the 80s and 90s was that we had the AIDS, crisis. And we lost so many people. I was going to a memorial every week or a funeral every other day or a hospice to say goodbye to somebody. That was really challenging because we lost so many brilliant people, but just the art scene was electric and alive. And, now when I moved my children back here and my husband, I was kind of excited to bring them up in New York City. And I moved into a neighborhood that I knew, where I knew the schools. I knew some of the neighbors. And it was very kind of like a picturesque American type of dream for a minute. And then, like when you go into the city, and that sounds very bridge and tunnel of me, but when you go into the city, it's like things just changed. Everything got really expensive.
Yeah.
All of Lower Broadway that used to be incredible became an outdoor mall. H&M, Zara, American Eagle, this thing, that thing, Starbucks. The rawness of New York City got taken away. It got very, very cleaned up. Is it better for traffic? Yeah, probably. Is it better for something?
Yeah, but at the same time, I think it really allowed us. One of the things that made me fall in love with Deborah right away is her strength. Her, not just the fact that she's beautiful and fun and loving and caring, but she's a real tough cookie. She's very strong, very independent, and can fend for herself. Doesn't matter really what you throw at her.
Yeah.
LA wouldn't have helped us grow kids like that.
Right.
We wanted a more urban setting where the kids would just leave the house and walk around and be in a public school versus the private LA school. And I personally have lived the American dream in that sense because I grew up watching American movies, right? But I grew up in a farm. So when I was growing up, and most of my friends were down in the city, I didn't have the ability of joining them in the city, being mischievous, being a street kid or throw firecrackers. Right. I was in the farm with my brother, basically. And then eventually I found myself in New York, a few decades later, where in the morning I am walking the dog and both kids to the public school that is down the block from my house, where I knew everybody, where I felt that sense of community and safety.
And then he opened a restaurant
and then
on
I
the
opened
same
my
block.
restaurant, on my block because it wasn't about the business restaurant. It was more about the community and really kind of like be close to the house, be close to the kids. I personally enjoyed it a lot. I didn't have anything to kind of like, compare it to. Yes. But I have to say, this decade has been incredibly formative, even for me.
And when I see like the Hudson Yards, I kind of giggle because it's a magnificent area on the water.
Right.
And I remember as a kid, I lived kind of close by on 37th and 9th Avenue. And that was just like all like, it was a disaster, like railroad tracks, space that wasn't being occupied. So when they started building the Hudson Yards, I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting. I mean, no subway really goes over here. It's hard to access. There's nothing around it except the Hudson Yards. But hey, who knows? Like maybe they're just opening up another area of the city that's going to be wonderful. And we went there for the opening of that thing. What's that thing called?
The staircase outside, yeah.
The vessel.
The vessel,
right. Which was like, whatever. I mean, it's like this architectural structure that isn't really to me, that impressive. You get to the top and the view is like, okay, whatever. I think if you're on top of
that's a jaded New Yorker thought.
Well, no,
like, people are like,
oh my God, this is fantastic.
I agree.
The only sense that I get, from places like those kind of
like, okay, there's New Jersey, all right.
Is that,
over here's Neiman Marcus, okay, whatever. No one's going to Neiman Marcus, by the way. I heard they're shutting it down.
Yeah, the problem with the development is that, very often in cities like this, you get a sense that certain development and certain growth is not really done for the people. It's not really done for the inhabitant of the area or the regular citizen. That's why I think a project like that one is actually struggling into retaining tenants and shops and stuff because It's very, very expensive, and it's an island within the island. You know, they created their own environment, and it's as beautiful as it is. I find it slightly alienating.
Well, I also happen to like modern architecture as well, so I sort of feel like, gosh, having an apartment in one of those high rises must be gorgeous.
Oh, sure.
I mean, the view, the water, so like, you know, I celebrate, you know, growth, but what happened was it became too much greed, too much growth, to the point of where we have all these cranes everywhere all over the city. There's construction sites and cranes everywhere. And half the buildings are not occupied, and we have probably the worst homeless situation we've ever had. I mean, it was not even this bad in the 70s when I was growing up, and I would see people on the train or on the street, or there was heroin addicts, like, you know, laying on the sidewalk, you know, which was like, you know, big in the sort of punk rock days. Now, this is like a disaster.
It is upsetting to see.
They're all over the train.
You know, how rich New York is, and how many issues you have in this community.
So they're putting all this money towards allowing people to come in. And I just don't feel the money's well allocated, and we have major infrastructure problems here. Like, for me, I probably should have run for some kind of office just because.
Please do. Come back and do that, please.
To help fix it. I mean, like, you know, Robert Moses designed highways that they didn't take into consideration that we were going to have like Uber and people coming in, and now like the BQE, it like stretches around Brooklyn Heights, like it's falling down, and it's a whole bottlenecking situation. So they can't, like, you know,
Parks and Recreation, your new urban planner.
No, but they can't even like shut it down because the trucks would have to drive through like rich Brooklyn Heights, and it's just a big mess.
Right.
And a lot needs to be fixed here.
Oh, we just got thunder. Sorry. You heard that. They heard you, Debbie. That's that. You need to run for mayor in 2 years. That's a sign. Gabriele, this is slightly off topic, but I was very curious. I'm curious, in Italy, how are you mentioned the movies from the States, and I was curious as to how, you know, things like, you know, The Godfather or the films like Serpico, or even, you know, the Sopranos, how are they perceived by, you know, the communities there?
Look, I think that everywhere around the world, when you're growing up and you're not in America, everything that comes from America comes with that aura of oh my gosh, this is America. Mm-hmm. As far as movies, growing up, I mean, I grew up. You know, my first movie in the theater was The Hulk, and after that, Star Wars. I grew up watching American comedy. Eddie Murphy was one of my heroes. So it was more kind of like idolizing and creating this idea. Once I arrived here, especially the fact that I arrived from Florence to Hollywood, it kind of like, it shifted very fast, because all of a sudden I was married with somebody that was part of that world. So
I was making him watch real films.
It demystified. One of the things that actually happened in the years is that many years ago, I mean, you know, in Italy, nobody watches movie with subtitles, right? It's very different than any other country. We have a gigantic tradition of dubbing. And many years ago, we had fantastic actors, Italian actors, that would lend their voices to Al Pacino, Sylvester Stallone, so on and so forth. And that old guard has slowly disappeared. I don't think for the lack of talent, it's just a sign of the times. And now it is basically impossible, at least for me, after living for 20 years in the US, to watch any dubbed movie, either English or any other language, especially because I have learned by being with her and by being around performers that even if the voice is dubbed, when you take away the natural voice and you replace it, even if it's your language, you're losing that intensity, you're losing that moment that is the acting. You cannot separate the actor from their own voice and put a different voice, even if you're really, really good. So it works when you're like a kid, and then it doesn't work for me anymore.
One thing that was funny too is that, like, you know, I acted in some mob stuff, and you know, Americans are kind of consumed with that culture. And what was interesting is that Gabriele grew up around it. Like, you know, you had in the 70s or the 80s, they even were bombing Florence, and he actually knew a lot about Camorra, Andrangheta, the different regions with the different mafiosos. I was kind of also getting kind of a nice, it was sort of sexy, getting like, you know, the real interpretation from him. And then he turned me on to some documentaries, but then like Gomorrah came out. The book came out first. The movie came out first. We saw that, but then the TV series came out, and now we kind of become obsessed with like several series that are just so well done in a Neapolitan dialect. So we have to watch the subtitles.
Yeah, you know, the Italian the movies that depicted the organized crime coming from Italy to the United States, the stuff that was set in Boston or New York or Chicago.
Right.
They felt you would have this on one side. You would have this kind of like idea of the story in the movie that was exciting because you wanted to see how it all developed, how it happened, and you were conflicted. From the Italian perspective, you know, the organized crime in Italy truly has devastated the country for many, many years. They have ruled the peninsula. They infiltrated our democracy and our government. So we really went through it. So on one side, yes, you would have a movie like Goodfellas. You would have a movie like Il Padrino.
Yeah. You didn't watch Goodfellas when it came out, right? Or you?
Well, I watched it on TV. I didn't watch all the movies. But when I met Deborah, I didn't realize that she was the one. My friends were like, "Oh my gosh, like you're dating the girl from."
She looked quite different. Yeah.
Like, yes, I don't remember. I don't know. I'm very proud. That was it, really.
Well, we have several questions that we should get to, I mean, maybe to start that off, could you give us maybe, you know, 3 things that our viewers could do this summer to add a little sort of, you know, Tuscan flair to their hosting or you know, the meals they're making? We're doing a lot of outdoor. I know for myself, I'm doing like a lot of outdoor socially distanced get-togethers. But maybe if you had like, I don't know, 3 key things that you would say, you know, in presenting and preparing.
Well, we have shifted. You know, we cook festive throughout the year. We're seasonal, but we kind of like, you know, progress as the time passes. I think that something that has changed actually this week for me is that all of a sudden I'm having white wine with peaches every time I have lunch. Oh. That is a hardcore Southern Naples, Capri. You know, last summer we had a blast. My mother used to do it with red wine because I'm from Tuscany, where red wine is more, you know, dominant. But a nice crispy white. I'm salivating. And a nice white crispy wine with like a knife and a peach, and then dig with the same knife. It's something that you can do on the stoop, something you can do anywhere.
Yeah, and also like we like to make. We've got a little outdoor space with a table, but you know, I put on like a cheap, pretty dress. I slick my hair back. I put on some just, you know, jewelry or whatever, and we get the music going. I try to look cute and not be in like sweats. I mean, that's not my thing anyway. Unless I'm exercising, but you know, music, make a nice table, have fresh fruit around, you know, make things that are light and grilled zucchini, just, you know, boom, boom, olive oil, salt and pepper.
Summer is great because, you know, there's so much seasonal stuff that you don't need to cook.
And we love like desserts like Macedonia, which is just cutting up all fresh fruit. You know, berries,
apples, peaches, apricots, a touch of sugar, some pine nuts.
Fresh lemon on top, and it macerates, and it just tastes like heaven. And it's
you can
fresh.
Add vodka to it if you want to.
Yeah, you can. And we, you know, we always offer our guests like a shot of limoncello or just a nice glass of something that's fresh. And I think that's kind of like the nicest thing is just to have really good ingredients, some good music, and feel festive.
And the thing that, you know, my suggestion is really don't overthink it. You know, people wants to spend time with you because they like you, because they're your friends. So don't feel the pressure of the kitchen. Find those 2 ingredients that you like, the simple recipe, something easy and quick.
I have one question here that they would like to know what's a common cooking practice that's misguided. Can you bust a cooking myth? Is there any?
One of the things that pisses me off incredibly, that works in a restaurant but doesn't work at home. Every time you see a professional chef demonstrating a recipe, they tell you, heat up your pan a lot. make the olive oil really hot before you toss anything in it.
Yeah, I did.
It's said that when you assume that somebody else is going to clean up your station. When you cook at home and after dinner you have to do the dishes, clean up the table, clean up the stove, actually starting off with, let's say, the pan, the fire, the olive oil, and the garlic, and then bring it to temperature instead of like making everything explode out of the pan. I also find that from the infusing standpoint, so to give a flavor to the oil, it is actually better a slow cook and a slow process rather than tossing, some onion or some garlic in a pan and just like in 3 seconds it's going to brown up. So that is one of the most things that, and then I don't season my steaks. So barbecue sauces before putting your steak on the grill make me want to choke you.
Let's not do that.
No.
All right. And I have another question here. As a married couple, how did you navigate the transition into a business relationship? How did you approach roles and boundaries, or did you?
Well, I mean, I have produced TV series before, and I found my husband to have a natural talent in front of the camera. And we had been given this little video camera for our wedding. And I'm like, look, stand up straight, talk slower. So I would direct him.
Yeah.
And then he would correct me. And we always have a good sense of humor with each other. Once that was all fine and good in the kitchen at home when we were shooting our videos. But then once we got our own show on TV, I was much more controlling because I was trying to protect my kids, trying to protect the choices. I don't like mediocrity. I want to press the buttons. I want to tell a good story. I don't care if like the Midwest, needs a longer explanation because it's something that they might not know, in different regions. I'd rather educate. Whereas the network at the time wanted to sort of dumb it down in America. And I'm like, look, I'm not Paula Dean. And he would be more willing to go along with stuff because maybe the fear of losing the job, where I was like, no, I will meet somebody pretty much halfway. But when it comes to putting my name on something and producing something, it made it hard because we would yell at each other. We were fighting for the same cause. So sometimes when things got heated, and this all happened in bed at like 2 o'clock in the morning after a long day, making notes, talking, crying, or whatever. And we just never went to bed mad for the most part. Sometimes we would get into arguments. I'm like, you sound pretentious, or you'd be like, you're being lazy or whatever. But we would use, I think, the criticisms to kind of pick each other up and teach each other, and then go, all right, let me just think if you have a point here.
Right.
I think the secret was on one side that we were truthful, and we still are, to our relationship, to our goals, our dreams, our way of life. There was, yes, it's TV, it's produced, it's cut and edited, but everything that you saw, it's really us, which is the best comment that I usually get from people when we go to festivals. And like, oh my gosh, you're just like, you're on TV. And
another good thing that we did is that when we got paid, we each got our own check. So it wasn't like one lump sum and you dip in and I dip in. You get your check, I get my check, and we're going to cut a check for the kids. I think to a degree, like we don't think about money when it comes to taking care of the house and bills and stuff, but we're both working our asses off, for this art thing. Yeah. It was important to maybe separate that a little bit, just so that you felt like, if he was going to go out and buy like motorcycle parts, I'm like, well, wait a minute, that was like meant for the phone bill.
And then the fact that the roles, as I learned to produce by spending time close to her and with all the crew and the people that came around us, she started learning more about the food. So as we started production, I was more focused on the kitchen work, on writing the recipe, testing the recipe with my culinary producers, making sure that, the finished plates look the way that, that I wanted. She was the one, that would really kind of like take in consideration, production issues, the schedules, whatever was scripted or whatever guest we would have.
Or what money was or wasn't being allocated. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's great. Good. We
symbiosis sort of.
We were a team. I think a team works. I mean, there's been moments where I'm like, oh, fuck you.
Like same here, hon.
For both of us, where we just get sick of each other.
Yeah,
right.
It is not easy to leave and work
that's
with
normal.
the same person.
It's normal. So sometimes when you feel like that, you're like, all right, I'm done. We finished the job, but sometimes you decompress away from each other. So New York has been great for me because I'm like, bye. I'll be in the city. I'm taking the subway, and I'll see you at like 7.
Picture dinner is ready.
Well, before we
have our own lives, we're not. I have a lot of friends that are connected 24/7.
Yeah.
We're not. We both do our own things, and when we get back together, we talk about the things that we discovered during the day or whatever. Yeah. And I think that's important too.
Very.
And we don't agree on everything.
Good. You shouldn't.
No.
So before we say goodbye, any simple kind of Italian mantra or super Tuscan mantra you want to share with us and our viewers about the philosophy of Italian cooking and
well, keep it simple. Never feel the pressure. It's useless to feel the pressure. When I try to find inspiration for new recipes, I usually, like you've seen all the books that I have, I don't read too much of them because I really don't want to fall into the predicament of ending up copying somebody or getting too influenced by somebody. But very often, the title of the recipe to me is enough to think of it and cook it in my head. And the same when I see a picture.
But not everybody has your talent.
But you don't need to feel the pressure. Feeding the people around you or feeding yourself is just a simple act of life or love. There's no reason why you should suffer because of it. It takes time, but for the most part, really, keep it simple. That is, and keep it seasonal. That is really my biggest suggestion.
Wonderful. Well, and Debbie, I have to tell you that I am 3 episodes into Arte Madrid. Before we sign off,
Fantastic.
And that intro, it's almost like the intro is so great in itself.
It's so nuts, right?
It's beautifully shot. It's like watching sort of a Fellini film as a Spanish, like a really long film broken up into a series. And I love your part. I think you're really owning Ava Gardner very well.
I had such a great time doing it. I had such a great time learning Castilian Spanish and just being over in Madrid and experiencing that city and its people and working with like wonderful actors. It's really binge worthy. It's only 8 episodes.
Yeah.
And people can find it at Amazon Prime.
That was one of the moments where we figured that, look, like kids are growing up. Like, I can't finally travel for like 2-3 months and leave, the kids behind and nothing changes and they're well taken care of. She probably wouldn't have accepted a role like that many years ago when the kids were too young.
Yeah, no. But it also showed me that I can work in Europe.
Yes.
And in a different language.
And anywhere else.
And have that challenge. It made me feel like so much like a good actress. And it just like, it filled my cup back up in terms of feeling creative. And, it swept the awards in Spain. So I just was really, really pleased by that. And having done that, I feel confident that once we do relocate, that I'll probably work in Europe more.
Yeah. And we're writing new stuff. So we hope to be able to come out, with some good content from the farm and the land and Florence, about the experience and more food and more discovery. So that's some of the works too.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time out. And I know you have daughters and you're getting ready for a big move, and we appreciate you, sharing your insights and just your hospitality with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you
for having us.
Yeah, it was nice to talk to you.
It was very pleasurable.
All right, and I hope to see you in Tuscany someday.
Come visit.
Look us up.
Y'all come visit.
And stay healthy, everybody.
Yes, and wear a mask, please.
We will.
Ciao.
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 Ciao for now.
Ciao for now.
Bye. Leave.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please turn in July 7th, where Sally Krawcheck will be talking personal finance in volatile times. Bye-bye.